Welcome to Interaction Best Tips and Tools. My name is CLAUS LEHMANN, and for the past 15-20 years I've been working with business learning and people development. In this process I've learned a lot. I've learned some tips, some tools by trial and error, and I would like to share some of these tips and tools with you in these small videos. Previously we've talked about some tools that can help you as a project manager, tools that can help you as a meeting manager, a facilitator, a communicator, a presenter. Today we're going to stick with project management. And previously we've talked about risks in projects. Today we're going to talk about probably number one risk, number one reason why projects actually fail. So we're going to talk about stakeholders. Stakeholders, meaning all the people that we have involved in our projects, that are interested in our project, that have a say in our project, that are being influenced by our project. All these people that in some way or another is part of our project, they can be critical factors. But what you learn today is they can also be positive factors. But regardless whether they are positive or negative, your ability to identify them and to handle them is critical for your success. So today I'm going to give you a tool, a method that will help you as a project manager to structure this process in what we call the 3-step stakeholder analysis. So the 3-step stakeholder analysis consists of 3 steps. The first step is identify your stakeholders. The second step is assess your stakeholders. And finally, you want to manage your stakeholders. For those of you who followed the video on 3-step risk management, you will see that it's the same 3 steps. And the benefit of this is it's something that you can easily relate to. It's something that you can easily convey to a project team that already have seen your way of doing the 3-step risk assessment. So number one, let's have a look. First, you want to identify all your stakeholders. In this process, it will really help you to use the 3-step brainstorm. At least that's our suggestion. So see the video on 3-step brainstorming and you will get the 3 steps that will help you identify all the stakeholders and have high quality in this session alone. So that's your first step. You want to identify who are all the people that in some way or another play a role in our project. And as I have said before, please involve your team. A classical mistake is a project manager would actually do the stakeholder assessment by himself, and then he will have some blind spots, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes a stakeholder that he didn't even think of. It could be a line manager in the organization requiring the time of one of your key resources. It could be a supplier that you didn't even knew existed. It could be anyone internally in your own organization, maybe at a higher level, somebody you didn't even count on as a stakeholder. So involve your team, generate ideas, generate and identify all the stakeholders that have an impact on your project. But that's only step number one, because once you have identified all the stakeholders, naturally not all stakeholders require the same type of management. Not all stakeholders require the same amount of attention and focus and communication or information or however you want to handle them. So it's important that you also find a way to actually assess them. And here we talk about how to prioritize your stakeholders. If you look in your textbooks from your project management courses, you might find many different versions of how to handle stakeholders. We really prefer to keep it simple. And the reason is, if it's simple, it's easier for you to actually do this session together with your team. And when you do it together with your team, it's, the outcome is better. You engage, you involve, you get more ownership, and this is why we suggest use a simple model. then you won't spend all the time explaining the model. It's something that you can actually open up and within a couple of minutes explain it, and then you can run with it. So the assessment tool that I'm going to talk about today looks like this. We have our stakeholders, and what we want now is to categorize them to find out how we can handle them. Basically, we are going to, in this model, we're going to handle our stakeholders on two parameters to begin with. First of all, we are going to have, consider the influence of this stakeholder. Out on one side, we have a very high influence. So high influence means a person, a stakeholder that has very high influence, and if it's the ultimate influence, it's a person who can decide whether to stop your project. So it's a person that can use the kill switch and it's game over. On the other side, we have a stakeholder on this side, very low on influence. This is a stakeholder that even if the stakeholder really wanted to, he couldn't stop the project. The project will continue regardless of his opinion of your project. So high and low on influence. On the other axis, we have involvement. Again, there are many ways to do this, but we like to consider involvement. Down here, we have low involvement. That means this is a person who is rarely engaged in the project. You could say it's something that's peripheral, something a person that maybe just pops up in the project maybe once or twice during the project, or maybe somebody that we hope not to see during the project. Up here on high on involvement, we have somebody who is highly involved in the project, somebody who spends a lot of time in the project, and somebody here who is naturally high on involvement could, is you as a project manager. Some of the key people in your project team will be highly involved. It could be departments or line managers in the areas where you have the most business. So that explains the axis. We can simplify this graph by making it into a 4-quadrant model. So if I cut it up into 4, I will find myself with an area where we have high influence, low involvement. We have high influence, high involvement. We have low influence, low involvement, and low influence, and so forth. So what's interesting now is you together with your team make sure you put up all the different stakeholders in the different areas. And you hear again, same technique as we used in the 3-step brainstorming. Involve your team, put them up here, make sure you have all the stakeholders put in place so you get a good overview of where to actually put your efforts. But also, this will help you with a communication strategy in regards to your stakeholders. Because now you have an overview, you have somebody who is very influential, but they're not very involved. Now you need to identify, how do I communicate to this person? But more importantly, before you start developing your communication plan, you should consider whether each of these stakeholders, especially the influential ones, are positive or negative. So together with your team, you should actually take the time to identify and even mark negative and or positive stakeholders in your surroundings. So why is this important? Well, the difference between a positive and negative is of course the way you're communicating with them. But most importantly, and that's something experienced project managers know, is that if you have an influential project manager stakeholder that is negative, sometimes you can actually use the positive stakeholder to influence the negative stakeholder. And also, in the beginning, I talked about risk assessment. This negative person in your stakeholder, in your surroundings, should also go directly into your risk assessment sheet as a probable risk, especially if they are as influential as this person here. Then we have stakeholders that we put in low influence, low involvement, and you could say, should we simply disregard them? Well, I suggest you keep them under observation, because more than once in history I've seen that stakeholders that initially were without influence were able to gather momentum, and maybe they teamed up with someone with influence, and maybe even went to someone with a lot of influence and with a negative attitude, and all of a sudden it became a showstopper. So critical for you as a project manager to keep an overview of your stakeholders. And now a little tip to you that are project managers. How about your project team? Have you ever had project participants that were negative about your project, that didn't believe in it, that were unengaged? Or have you tried to have project participants that were really eager and driven by the project? I'm sure you have had the experience of having both. So internally, this is the only time I suggest you as a project manager do stakeholder assessment alone. Make a little stakeholder assessment of your project team. Identify who you think is positive and who you think are negative or have a negative influence on the team and the team's work. So this is your little tool to become a better project manager or a people manager in your projects. So now you know, or you can develop a strategy of how to handle your project participants. But that was a little bit on the a note on the side. However, now that we have gotten an assessment and an overview of all the stakeholders together with your team, everybody is engaged, you have categorized them, you have identified positive and negative stakeholders, what's to do next? Well, I have to return to one of my favorite statements. Identification is worthless without action. So until now, all we've done is put post-it notes, have discussions about stakeholders, but nothing have really changed. Nothing will change until we start communicating and we start handling our stakeholders. So you need to find a way to create some action. And here we have different templates. We have what we call a stakeholder assessment sheet and a communication plan. This is where we have developed some tools that will help you document your stakeholder assessment and also to plan for the actions you're going to take. You can actually, you're scoring your stakeholders, you are creating responsible people to take care of them, to communicate to them, and also you develop a communication plan that will allow you to communicate in a proper way to these stakeholders. If you're able to do this successfully, you will be more successful in your projects, because stakeholder management is one of the most critical areas within project management. I wish you the best of luck. If you would like to have some of these templates, give us send us a mail, give us a call. We would be happy to help. Just let us know. I hope to see you again some other time in some of the other videos with best tips and tools from InAction. And take care and see you soon.